Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Rabbi Address. I'm going to just let you start right away.
Okay, so hello, everybody. For you guys, Boker Tov. It's morning there. It's afternoon here in beautiful southern New Jersey, where it's cloudy and it should be 80 and it's 50. So it's ridiculous. So anyway, we have in this hour a huge, really very interesting Torah portion to discuss. I have a bunch of things I want to lay out for you, and hopefully you're caffeinated enough to get your brain engaged, because there's some really bizarre stuff that's going on here, and some very interesting. I'm not at my home. I just got done teaching at a synagogue, so I'm crashing at my son's house, and I don't want to mess anything up for him because I'll get yelled at.
Rabbi, I should just interject. If you want me to share the screen, I did pull up the Torah portion on Safaria. So if you want to show any of it, I can share that at any point.
We may do that in a couple seconds.
Yeah, you just let me know.
But first, to assuage the gods and make sure that they're all happy, let's do the bracha for Torah study. Ready? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So this particular Torah portion, and we're going to meet, please, on Parasha Acharei Mot, a very strange Torah portion, and we're going to meet on Leviticus 16. So if you have a Torah commentary, I hope you do, we're going to go and meet at Leviticus 16. It's a short Torah portion. It's a couple of chapters long. It's never going to make the top 5 Torah portions in the yearly ranking of great Torah portions, because this is a problematic Torah portion on a variety of different levels. And if we get time, in chapter 18, sections of the Torah portion that have been politicized rather dramatically, which is always a danger. So, but we're going to start with 16, and the context of this Torah portion begins with after the death, Acharei Mot, and refers to something that took place several Torah portions ago, and that's the death of Aaron's 2 sons, Nadav and Abihu. If you remember from a couple of weeks ago, when we did this, and I'm sure somebody did it with you, Aaron's 2 sons brought strange fire that they broke the rules. And the punishment by the Torah God, who is a very unforgiving God, is if you do it the wrong way, or if you do it the way you're not supposed to, you're going to die. So of course, Nadav and Abihu are killed right away. Aaron gets the news, and he's met with silence. He meets with silence, and there's all kinds of commentaries about that. Then these Torah portions are interrupted by some other Torah portions, and then we come to Acharei Mot, which allegedly picks up right after this incident, and there's an instruction on 16 where God talks to Moses and says, "Look, I want you to go tell Aaron, your brother, that he's not allowed to come into the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, behind the curtain, which is in front of the cover, which is on the ark. You go to a synagogue, you'll see, you open the ark doors, and there's usually a curtain, and behind that curtain are the Torah scrolls usually. Because if he does this, he'll die." So that's the beginning of this Torah portion. The second part of this, which we'll talk about after I ask you to think about something, has to do with this very elaborate ritual of purification that Aaron goes through with the sanctuary. That's a precursor to really Yom Kippur. So I want you to look, if you have the text in front of you, I want you to look at this particular passage, verse 2. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe daber al Haron achi va'al yavo b'chol eit el hakadosh mibeit leparochet el Penei hakaporet asher ha'aron. The Aron is the ark. V'lo yamut, he'll die. Yamut, die. And it talks about this curtain. Now, you can't go behind the curtain or you'll die. All right? That's the instruction. The Torah is metaphorical language. It's some of its very powerful metaphorical language. So I want to ask you, just let us soak, as we just did the blessing. Let this phrase just speak to you. And I want you to play with this idea of the curtain. What does that mean? If you were preaching the sermon today at services, what does this mean? There's a wonderful midrash that is quoted often about a curtain. Some of you may have curtains in your house right now. And when the curtains are closed, you can't see out. Nobody can see in. Open the curtain, light, you can see out, people can see in. I want you to play with that image, because I think it's a very, very, very powerful image. What does a curtain mean to you? What kind of curtains do you have spiritually? What movie immediately should jump into your mind about a curtain and what's behind the curtain that you shouldn't know? Anybody want to start off? Just unmute and go for it.
You're not talking about the Wizard of Oz, are you?
Yes, of course I'm talking about the Wizard of Oz.
Because the Wizard of Oz was just so wonderful, wasn't he?
One of the great movies of all time. Not a children's movie. It's an adult movie. Because now I want you to play with that image. The Dorothy and the three, the Tin Men, they expose the wizard.
Yeah.
All right. They pull back the curtain and see the truth. Oh, I'll play with that. How many people do you know who are afraid to pull back the curtain and see who they really are? How many people that you may know don't want to ever pull back that curtain because they don't want to ever really know who they really are? Christo, are you scratching or raising your hand?
Motioning to myself.
You want to talk about it or not?
I'll just keep it really short. I've always struggled with severe mental health problems and very frustrating learning disabilities. So I was like, people say ignorance is bliss. I'll leave it at that. So,
well, but see, this is why the Torah study is I love it. Because once you get off the literalness and allow the Torah, the text to asok to you, to speak to you, we all play with this idea, Christo, of curtains. And it can be positive and negative. One of the questions that came to me is, why, dear God, why are you so afraid to have people get to know you? Because this image of hiddenness is a theme throughout the Torah. A couple of weeks ago, Moses wants to see God. God says, you can't see me. You can't see me. You can go to the cleft of the rock. I'll pass by you. I'm going to have my hand on you can't see me. I think it's the passage right after the Revelation, and Moses comes down, and when he goes into this Mishkan, he has nothing there. When he goes to speak to the people, he has a veil, on him. Why are people so afraid? Is God afraid to really? Are we afraid?
This is why the Pardes method of examining the texts, plural texts, are so important.
Yeah, there's so many levels. Yashim?
Yeah, I just want to say I've always thought of it this way, that it's like I've always thought of it in terms of frequencies. If we are not really ready to perceive something, then that higher frequency message image can in fact destroy us. There is a mismatch there of frequencies of the divine and our ability to perceive the divine. So that curtain is not that God wants to hide his divine essence from us, but he wants to protect us from being immolated by that knowledge before we are ready. That's how I always saw it.
Oh, look, it's like therapy.
Yeah.
Well, you're ready. Therapy works when you're ready for it.
Absolutely.
You know, if you're not ready for it, you could be told you could use therapy. You could sit in front of a million therapists. They could tell you everything from how you hate your mother to why you did this. But if you're not ready to listen to the message or to use your language, if you're not attuned to that frequency, you will not pick up the message. And so, I think you're right. I mean, I was just teaching this about an hour and a half ago to a congregation here in Jersey, and one of the people in the group said that he was an older adult until he got a certain age, and he was someplace and he looked at it was by the ocean, and he was thinking about all this stuff, and all of a sudden he realized something as he looked at the ocean and understood the magnitude of the universe and the magnitude of the ocean and the fact that we're just little specks. And he said, he turned around, he says to the group, he says, you know, my life changed that day because I realized I had an understanding of who I really was. And, you know, we said, comment says, well, you know, it's like Yashim was just saying, you were not ready to receive that message for a whole variety of reasons until that moment. So this is why just play with this idea of the curtain. Yeah, Leona.
Well, what if you have a certain whatever in your mind about what's behind the curtain, and the curtain opens and you're devastated because it's totally different from what you expected. You had a preconceived notion in your mind, and it's not what you wanted. It could just change your life.
That is life, isn't it, Leona? How many times have we is that somebody? Okay, can you hear me, Leona?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, what you raise is something that's, if you lined up every rabbi that you know and said, and asked them in your pastoral counseling experience, if you haven't ever had somebody walk into your office with exactly that statement, I thought I was fill in the blank, but when I realized the truth, it wasn't anything like I thought. And I was either A, devastated, B, surprised. Could have been a relationship, marriage, a job, whatever. And it's like I pulled back the curtain and I saw the truth, and it was like nothing I expected. But that's happened to every single one of us. In one way, shape, or form, it's happened to this. This is why some people, Leona, don't want to ever pull back that curtain, because they don't, I would suggest. They may be afraid to find out who they really are. And that's really frightening, to come to the conclusion, to understand this is really who I am. I had these dreams, I had these fantasies, I had this vision of who I wanted to be, could be, wanted to be. But now at this stage, this happens a lot as we get older. But now I really understand that I'm not, or I'm not going to be, or I don't really want to be. And there's a certain amount of acceptance. It's a certain amount of growth. It's a certain amount of transition, of letting go ideas, fantasies, dreams that we may have had when we were younger. We're going to do, as part of my Jewish sacred aging work, we're going to do another webinar at the end of the month on the concept of loss. And really, we all are challenged to deal with certain types of how we deal with loss, especially as we get older. Especially as we get older. There's a wonderful book that, if you've never read it, and if this stuff interests you, it was from the 80s. It's an 80s book called Necessary Losses, by Judith Vorst, Vorst. It's on Amazon. But she talks about, the losses that we engage throughout our life. And some of it's negative and some of it's very positive. But in part of it is like, this is why I love this image in this Torah portion. But it's like pulling back a curtain and trying to see who we really are. Some people want that. And I would submit that, and probably some of you know people who say, I don't want to ever pull back that curtain. I'm very happy the way things are. And, it's fascinating. Any other thoughts on the curtain image from either your own perspective? Yeah, Sherry.
When you were first asking about the image of the curtain and what that makes you think of, my first thought was, well, it's the curtain, it's the whatever separates the seen world from the unseen, the spiritual, and it just makes me wonder, why there even has to be that separation. Why did humans have to be created with that separation to begin with?
Well, now you raise one of the fundamental questions that's raised in the Torah.
Do you have the answer?
What?
Do you have the answer?
If I had the answer, I'd be on Oprah making $1 million. Sadly, that is not happening. But one of the challenges is, and this comes from the mythology of Genesis 3, which is to me the best chapter in the Torah. It's the introduction that we cannot be as God.
We can,
because it's the Tower of Babel. It's the expulsion from Eden. It's the desire to be Elohim as a God. And of course, we can't. And this goes to the whole Freudian slip, whole notion of where we are and why we created gods to begin with. And those stories in the Torah really, they're very, very real, because people are living them. I mean, all the time. There, for some reason, for some people, they achieve some sense of harmony between, or acceptance or understanding of these two worlds, Sherry. And then there's a tremendous amount of people. You go up the road from where you are in Boulder. There's a tremendous number of people right now who are struggling with this and trying to harmonize or unify these types of belief. But it has to also do with, I think, an understanding of pulling back the curtain of our own ego and accepting the fact that we are finite human beings. And as such, there's a certain mystery to existence that we may never, ever really know. And instead of worrying about the universe, Judaism says you better take care of yourself first. Take care of yourself first. So you may not ever really understand and find what your place in the universe is. And by doing that, you'll really get the answer. And that's a lifelong struggle. It's a lifelong struggle. But it's at the heart of who we are as Jews. Find out your place in the universe. It's like tikkun hanefesh. It's taking care of your own soul. And in doing that, you're going to find where you belong in the universe. And by doing that, you may find God. whatever God means to you, because it changes as we get older. The God when you were 13 is not, hopefully, it's not the same, quote, God that you believe in now when you may be 55. It's certainly not, I mean, speaking personally, certainly not the same concept that when now in my age, in my late 70s, totally different, totally mind-boggling different from even when I was ordained in 1972. Totally different experience. And which is part of the fun. Any other comments on just this one little word? John?
Oops, John, you have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I got
you. Stop me if it's not relevant. When you asked about curtain, David Galanter wrote in a book from 1996 his interpretation of Judaism, and talked about the veil and as a instrument of separation. Is that relevant here, or?
Yeah, sure, because the curtain separates, the veil separates, the mask separates. There's a wonderful book by the late, one of my old professors, Dr. Borowitz, called The Mask Jews Wear. And he talks about all the different identities that we assume, some of which are protective. The veil and the mask and the curtain. It's very tough. It's tough to reveal our true selves to other people, especially in this day and age when it's easy to escape because you got the machine, and you have this. See, because I can hide on this, as many people do. And I can assume different identities on this, as many people do. But that's the power of relationships. You really, it's for those of you who've read your Buber, it's the ultimate I-thou relationship of really taking off the masks, the veils, the curtains that separate people. And we see this all the time. You see, not only in personal relationships, you're seeing it right now in international relationships. You know, what if you really want to play with this, you could say, what are those people in Israel and Gaza afraid of? What are they afraid of? If they really got to know each other, what are they afraid of? Because those of you who've traveled, and I'm sure, and you've actually sat down with people in other countries and other cultures, you know, it's amazing that most people, they have the same hopes and fears and dreams as every one of us have. I want to make it through the day. I want to take care of my family. I want to have some fun. I want to make sure my kids are okay. My grandkids are okay. What are you afraid of? And just throw that out for you. So this one little concept of the curtain, you could play with it for a whole variety of different ways. Any other comments before we move on to something that equally is bizarre? Well, it's different anyway. I don't know, bizarre, it's just different. Okay, so moving on from this chapter, from this passage, right in the beginning of 16, you have this ritual, this really interesting ritual of the purification, not only of Aaron, but of the sanctuary. So Sherry, if you can bring up Leviticus 16 from the great master Sepharia, which I wish I had when I was at the seminary. It would have made studying a lot easier. Okay, so can everybody see that? I can't see everybody. So this is the beginning.
Tell me where you want me to go.
No, that's okay. We're gonna tell your brother Anna, keep going. Scroll up. Yeah, that's verse 3. Start with. Go ahead.
Scroll down.
Yeah, up, down. Stop. Thus only Aaron shall enter the shrine with the bull of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. So he's going to sanctify the sanctuary. He brings in 2 bulls and a ram, dressed in sacred linen, girded with a linen sack. He's going to get dressed up. He's going to get dressed up in Class A uniform, because these are the sacred vestments. He shall get clean, because water is a mode of purification, and put them on. You got to take a bath, put on these special clothes. And from the Israelite community, he's going to take 2 he-goats for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. Keep scrolling. Fine. Aaron's to offer his own bull of sin offering to make expiation for himself and for his household. The commentary said this is for his wife and children. And he'll take 2 he-goats and let them stand before God at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He shall place lots upon the 2 goats. That's like Purim, casting lots. One marked for Adonai and the other marked for Azazel. Go ahead, keep going. And the goat designed a lot for Azazel should be left standing alive before God to make expiation with it, and descend it off into the wilderness for Azazel. Okay, go ahead back to the full screen.
Okay.
All right, what's happening here? Unmute as soon as you know, buzz in with the correct answer. What's happening? Anybody? Bueller? Come on. You know this. Yeah, Sheen, go ahead. Unmute.
I was trying to look up books and think at the same time, so I'm not sure if I'll answer your question, but I think it's the beginning of the scapegoat designation.
You got it. This is scapegoat. Okay, we have this again. So you have these 2 animals. One, Aaron they cast lots. I got 2 animals in front of me. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay, you. Animal number 1, you're designated for Adonai. I'm going to sacrifice you. And through that sacrifice, my sins and the sins of my household will be gone. You, goat number 2, you carry the sins of the community. So I put you out to Azazel. Okay? Any of this, where is this sometimes reenacted in contemporary Jewish liturgy? First one that answers that question can eat a cheeseburger. Where is this?
That's not good for my health, but I'll also answer. Isn't this kind of recounted in the mock story each year during the high holiday?
Yes. Which holiday?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur, of
the
course.
one that saves on my grocery bill every year.
Yes, Yom Kippur. When you go to shul this October for Yom Kippur, whether you go in person or you go to the great Zoom synagogue, focus on the liturgy, and what's really being reenacted here is this sense of atonement. We don't do animal sacrificing. So it's through the prayers that we seek this expiation, this atonement, this forgiveness, not only for ourselves, but for the community. Now, the Azazel goat is for the community. Here's another question. Who or what is Azazel? Anybody? Come on. I bet you know this. Just unmute. This is part of our tradition here. What or who is Azazel? Anybody? Anybody? Wow. Okay, cool. And you can unmute because you're very silent. This is cool. Yeah, Michael must have Googled it.
It has to be the within the circle, within the tribe, within the scope of Hashem. But
What?
Azazel is that is outside that circle. That's
Well,
why you send the goat on an unknown journey. It's because the goat is going outside the circle.
the goat, and in another passage, the goat is thrown off a cliff.
Whoa.
Oh, yeah, whoa. Okay, Azazel is a demon. This may come as a surprise to some of you, but Judaism has a rich, you should do an adult education study on this, a rich tradition of demonology and superstition. We have a whole host of malachim, angels or demons, and they all have specific jobs. Okay? Who is one of the most famous angels or demons or spirits that we have? Some of you may know some of these superstitions. This is an angel or a demon who's fearful to take the souls of newborn children. And sometimes you put an amulet or on the crib to keep this demon away. Anybody know the name of this demon? Really? You guys got to study this. This is part of who we are. That's Lilith, right? That's
Take me a moment.
Yeah, Lilith.
Note to self, Rabbi, don't piss her off.
No, don't, because she takes no prisoners. We have 4. If you look at the book of Daniel, another great book that is never studied, we should. Just another class you can do. On the book of Daniel, we are introduced to 2 of the guardian angels who guard the sacredness in heaven, Raphael and Gabriel. And they're joined by Uriel and one other guy who I forgot. Raphael and Gabriel, these are 2 ministry. These are the 4 chief angels that surround the holies, that surround God, and they do God's message. Raphael is Raphael, not the city Rapha, but Refuah, healer. Raphael's job is to heal the sick. Uriel is Ur, or light, is the light of God. Here's another one. You may have heard of this angel, Samael, sometimes called Satan. He has a starring role in the book of Job. This is all part of our tradition. We, in our very sophisticated, modern 21st century suburban Judaism, say poo, which of course is a Jewish superstition. We don't believe in that, but of course we do. Of course we do. We've just repressed it, but it's very, very much part of our tradition. Some of us even use it, because when somebody says something really nice, we say sometimes, don't give me a kinahara. What's a kinahara? In Hebrew, it's ka'ayin hara. Yashin?
It's the evil eye.
The evil eye. All of a sudden, we're sophisticated. I got 17,000 degrees. I'm saying, oh, the evil eye should not. Ooh. No, it's part of who we are. It's part of who we are. Azazel. This is a commentary from the modern conservative commentary called Es Chaim. I don't know whether any of you have it right now, but this is on a commentary on this particular passage, Azazel. Azazel is taken to be the name of a demon, either the demon that entices people to sin, or the malign power that testifies against them on the Day of Atonement. You know all that stuff in the liturgy about you're going to be judged? Well, this is part of that mythology. Then the scapegoat is cast into the wilderness, or in later interpretation, thrown off a cliff, rather than sacrificed in the usual manner to avoid violating the ban against sacrificing, offering sacrifices to demons. We're not supposed to do that, so that's why they're not sacrificed. The Midrash sees Israel offering the scapegoat to Azazel as a bribe to persuade him not to testify against Israel, or as a distraction to keep from him the evil work. What can we see as the meaning of the scapegoat if we do not accept the Azazel as demon theory? It may be a symbol of the evil impulse itself. Remember, according to classical Jewish mystical tradition, there are two competing impulses within each one of us from the time we are alive: the Yetzer HaTov, the good inclination, and the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. That's the stuff that says, I want that extra piece of cake. Or it's the stuff that says, I covet this. Or I can get away with this. It's the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov are in constant combat within our psyche to control us. This is before Dr. Freud. But if you think it has nothing to do with it, you're wrong. It has a lot to do with it. So the Azazel is this demon that drives, it's a judgment. It drives us away, okay? In modern Hebrew, if you want to curse somebody, lech lazazel, go to hell. So this purification ritual. Now here's something else I want you to. This is right. We reenact this. Okay. The Aaron, the high priest, stands before the congregation and sends this sacrifice to, as if he's atoning for the sins, because he also has to atone for his own failings. If you pay attention to the beginning of the Yom Kippur liturgy, in many of the prayer books, the rabbi stands before the open ark and prays the Hineni prayer, which basically says, here am I, God, in my humility, I have sinned. On behalf of my congregation, please forgive me for those things that I have done wrong. Remember the Midrash for Yom Kippur, which begins every Yom Kippur service. For the sins between man and God, Yom Kippur atones. For the sins between individuals and other individuals, Yom Kippur does not atone. You have to do it yourself. So
that's exactly what Machzor Chadash that I use at home says in the very beginning.
That's every Yom Kippur service.
Yeah.
Unless you think this is isolated, do we have other religious traditions where a human being takes on the sins of the community and is sacrificed, and through that sacrifice, the sins of the community are expiated? Anyone hazard a guess? Anybody want to hazard a guess? No? You think about it.
Jesus Christ.
What? Yeah, somebody, yes.
That's
All of this is interconnected. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So when you study this and then lay it over Jewish tradition and history, especially the Pharisaic movement, which emerges in the Greco-Roman period and leads into the development of Christianity, which is an outgrowth of Pharisaic Judaism, and you have this ritual expiation where even the high priest assumes the sins and the goat. Well, it just says, okay, yeah, it makes sense. I understand that. I understand that. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Yashin, are you waving or you have a question?
I just wanted to say two things. One, isn't Jesus known as the Lamb of God?
Yes, yes, yes.
And that's again related to that scapegoat ideology. of
Yes, it's not-
sacrifice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Nothing happens in a vacuum. That's why, in order to, I think I maintain, but a lot of people, to understand a lot of this stuff where it comes from, it doesn't pop up. It's an organic evolutionary process, which we're still engaged with today. Yeah.
The second thing I want to say is that we're always forgetting about the scapegoat that is cast into the wilderness. And that's something that intrigued me because I've always been, concerned for myself, but also interested in the whole idea of scapegoat and projection. And this whole I've always been concerned that the scapegoat that is sent to suffer alone, without the support of community, without the support of knowledge of what is familiar, that is doing a different kind of expiation and also projection of the people. And we rarely talk about the one that is sent out. And I just want to bring that in to see, how you're going to address it in this.
Well, the concept of the scapegoat, we're still living. You're
Yeah.
right. It is the other, because what is the scapegoat? The scapegoat is that which is determined by the community to be the other, and so we expel the other. So, what is anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism is the other. We expel or persecute or attack that which we do not understand, and so this is all interconnected. This why this Torah portion, which is and we almost, before we run out of time, I could just do one more thing. This is why this Torah portion, which is a lot of times is just skipped over, except for 18. Really, you can dive into because it really unlocks a lot of stuff that we don't unlock a lot of times. I want to go before we, because we have about 15 minutes left. I want to take a look at Leviticus 18 because this is one of the most famous chapters that has been politicized.
I think Anne wanted to say something as well, but I'm not sure you saw her hand up.
I just had a quick question that I wanted to
Where
ask.
are you?
We were still on that topic.
Wait a minute. Where?
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, your screen is blank.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Christian, and obviously, so the Jesus Christ aspect is very familiar to me. But what I was wondering is, okay, so obviously Christians believe that Jesus was the Messiah. But if Jews also believed, for example, that whoever is the Messiah, would that person be playing that role that Jesus plays for Christians of taking on that sin and being that scapegoat? Do you have a second Messiah that plays the other scapegoat in the story that or in the portion of the Bible that of the Torah that we just read?
The answer to your question is, I wish I could see your figures. All I see is a weird black screen with two weird circles on it. You can go, Sherry, you can go back to the full screen. The full with everybody on it. Okay, where are you? Anne's screen, you're down on the bottom. And the answer, the quick answer to your question is no. We don't have several messiahs. In fact, the concept of messiah really is late. It's Pharisaic. Pharisaic Judaism emerges post-exilic after the return of the exiles in the 6th century BCE. Pharisaic Judaism grows up in the Greco-Roman period, following the destruction of the Alexander the Great Empire and the division of that empire into 4 sub-categories, of which Judea was smack dab in the middle of the Ptolemaic Greeks in Egypt and the Seleucidian Greeks in Babylonia, right, what is now Iran and Iraq. and against that episode that Hanukkah developed, that's another story for another time. The Pharisees developed this concept of the personal Messiah. So it is a fairly late, there's some people who think that it may have been involved around the book of Daniel, which was also Pharisaic, post-Greco-Roman. When Christianity evolves, which started off as a branch of Pharisaic Judaism, traditional Judaism, they just said, in order to fulfill the prophecies of the Pharisees, we need to have the Messiah, and we have to have the Messiah sacrificed for our sins. If you take away Easter, as you know, if you take away Easter, you have another branch of Pharisaic Judaism, you have another branch of the Orthodox Judaism. What changed everything was in the 300s with the conversion of Emperor Constantine to make Christianity the state religion, which is a great lesson for the Jews, because every time religion and politics meet, we get in trouble, historically. So the whole development, I don't know whether you've taught a class or you've had an adult education class on how Christianity evolved out of first century Judaism, but it's really fascinating because it have to get played out against the Roman war. Remember, the Roman war attempted to revolt against Rome between 66 and 70. And then you had another war between around 135 of the Common Era, the Bar Kokhba Revolution. And there's a lot of messianic concepts that are floating around the Middle East at that time. It's real. Again, you have to understand this in the context of all the stuff that's happening. There's a long involved, that's sort of like a rabbinic answer, Anne. So there's no, and there's no second Messiah. And in truth, the non-Orthodox community rejected, the Reform community, when it began in the 1800s, rejected the concept of the personal Messiah and substituted in the Aleinu the concept of a messianic age. And that's what many people who are in a non-Orthodox synagogue pray for, except where it's been reintroduced in some of the new prayer books. There's a prayer in the traditional prayer book in the second paragraph of a prayer called the Amidah, which reintroduces the concept of bodily resurrection of the dead, which is a Pharisaic principle, which the traditional Jews pray for every single day, in the concept of a phrase called Acharei Mot, which literally means in English, Acharei, who makes living, Chai, Hametim, the dead. So that's part of the Judaism that grew up in the Greco-Roman period. That's short
super fascinating. Thank you so much. Very, very interesting.
I can't tell you what to do, but probably that would be an interesting adult education stuff. Leviticus 18, real fast, because we're going to run out of time. Leviticus 18 is this one chapter that deals with specifically two of the taboos that are indicative of religious life in most religions. One taboo is blood. The other taboo is sex. And Leviticus 18 is this very strange chapter that lists nothing but a tremendous number of sexual taboos, incestuous taboos, family taboos. And in Leviticus 18, you have the very famous passage of the prohibition against men sleeping with other men. It's the proof text that has been used for saying homosexual activity is contrary to religious law. It comes from this Torah portion. It comes from
verse 22.
Yeah, 1822. Not the year, but the verse. Do not have carnal relations with your neighbor's wife. There's all kinds of these things in 22. Do not lie with a male as one lies with a woman. It is an abhorrent to'eva. So this is the passage from our tradition that has been politicized beyond belief. And it's important to understand this because it's politicized in the contemporary. And you're going to see it all over the place between now and November. Okay, it's not a political statement. It just happens to be a reality. Given there's 3, 6, 9, about 12 people on the call, 13, 14 people, probably some of you have had experience, either personally or in family or extended family, of dealing with the LGBTQ issue. This is where, in our world today, the contemporary Jewish denominations have great division. When I worked for the URJ before they shut down our department, all the LGBTQ programming came out of our department. So we produced this book called Kulanu, All of Us, which is, as you can see, thick. And it's subtitled, A Program and Resource Guide for Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Inclusion. We did this about 20 some years ago. When the URJ got rid of my department, they cut out all the departments allegedly for money reasons. I mean, I stole this, a couple of them from my own, because I did the book. But this is 350 pages of the entire history of the reform movement's LGBTQ resolutions, including, because this is a very, very getting a lot of play right now, a ritual for when you transition from one sex to another. There's a blessing written by one of my colleagues who did this, who transitioned. So one would say, how can you do this? Because you're flying in the face, and we did, of what the literal interpretation of this passage from Torah is. And that goes to the whole concept of the difference between non-Orthodox Judaism and Orthodox Judaism, or how you see the Torah itself, whether you see it as an act of divine revelation, and thus the authority being a supernatural being, or whether you see this as a development over the course of centuries, written by, edited by people based upon a particular social, economic, political, and religious context. That's two different authority systems. But you also know that in Judaism, the concept of proof texting, in other words, we take a text and then we reevaluate it constantly through history, and we change the development and the meaning and interpretation of that text in many cases, depending upon the context of the time in which we're living. And that's exactly what happened with Leviticus 18:22. Obviously, over the course of history, and especially in the 21st and the 20th century, the context of the Jewish family and the demands and the realities of the Jewish family changed, so that this text was totally reinterpreted, especially in the non-Orthodox community, to allow this to take place. And the fact that in all the liberal seminaries, our seminary, the conservative seminary, the Reconstructionist seminary, the non-residential of Boston Hebrew College, Academy for Jewish Religion, the Olive Seminary, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you have active LGBTQ students who are going through and will go out and become and being ordained as rabbis, cantors, and Jewish educators, where that may not happen at another school, seminary where I teach right now, Yeshiva University and Wurzweiler School, which is an Orthodox seminary. I just wanted to point that out to you before we run out of time, because this particular Torah portion has that particular verse, which has been politicized and has been reinterpreted throughout the liberal non-Orthodox Jewish community. And one of the challenges within the contemporary Orthodox community is, if you're LGBTQ, where do you go? And where's the support network for you? And I wanted to point that out to you before we end. Any questions on this particular thing or comments, Sherry?
Excuse me, was there ever a time when that verse was not interpreted that way?
Well, yeah, it's still interpreted literally.
But was there ever a time in the way past when it had a different meaning?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And in the commentaries that I've read on it, I haven't run across it. But this is why I mentioned the fact, another study that would be very interesting. I mean, again, I can't tell you what to do, is the whole taboo in traditional religion across the religious line, not just Judaism, about taboos dealing with blood and sex. You know, and the blood taboo is, you know, you're familiar with the menstrual issues and when a woman is unclean, and the food laws, and the sexual stuff. And this is even way before Freud. It's interesting. It really is. I mean, one could almost say, well, what are you afraid of? You know, like the curtain thing. Well, wait a minute. What are you afraid of? But if you go to one of the websites that talk about Torah portions every week, and a lot of us subscribe to it, is a website called Torah.com. And if you look at Torah.com this week for this Torah portion, for Acharei Mot, there are 3 or 4 very, very scholarly essays on the incest taboos and exactly some of the sexual taboos that appear in this Torah portion. This is part of who we are, ladies and gentlemen. This is part of Jewish tradition. This is part of Jewish textual tradition. And again, we do lay people a disservice because we don't talk about it enough. We don't teach it. But this is part of, like, the demonology. This is part of who we are. This is part of what makes us a community. Yashin.
So I've thought about this issue too, because I'm originally from Istanbul and I did a PhD in anthropology, and I looked at a lot of that West versus East, you know, sort of cosmology and cultural, and then this was in, you know, I was into Edward Said, you know, on Orientalism, and he does talk about the Oriental sexuality, and I was intrigued, and I went into that line, and I sort of tried to read up on psychology as well regarding that. You know, according to some different sources in the Middle East, you know, there was this polymorphous perverse, I think, in that kind of sexuality. It was pretty rampant, and it was also, you know, somehow it wasn't by, you know, consent, of course. A lot of slaves, a lot of owners, a lot of power dynamics. In other words, sexuality was not regulated. It was not allowed. It was allowed to be expressed in so many different ways, so many of them harmful to the individual being, you know, the agency, the personality. So I think sometimes when I think of this kind of law, I think of it as an attempt to regulate and to almost like to bring a civilized, regulated, socially acceptable version of expressing our human innate sexuality as it was expressed in the early civilizations. Am I like too off the mark for thinking that?
No. If you look at some of the commentaries, even in the modern commentaries, they will echo exactly what you're saying. Sexuality is very powerful and very frightening to people, and needs to be. And look, in the beginning of chapter 18, I think it's verse 5, you have the phrase, "These are the commandments, and you shall hide by him. You shall live by them." In other words, we're giving you these commandments in order to regulate society, because we understand that if we don't regulate society, it's absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. We do that's the same thing. We just don't, except in maybe Massachusetts or I-95 in Florida, you just don't drive the way you want to drive.
No.
We have a red light and you're supposed to stop, and a green light. I'm not being facetious. The Akedah, the Genesis 22 that you read on Rosh Hashanah, the binding of Isaac, one of the metaphorical interpretations of that, Yashim, is in order to be truly free, we have to accept boundaries. Because if everybody did what anybody wants to do, whenever anybody wants to do it, you have total chaos. So society has to create boundaries, binds, laws. Chai bahem. You should live. You'll be able to live by them. Leviticus 18, verse 5. Fascinating. Anyway, here's a couple of ideas for future adult education for you guys. We are out of time. We're over time. So y'all take care of yourself, as we say down here in South Jersey. And stay, most of all, until I see you again, hopefully next month, stay safe and stay healthy. Take care of yourself. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom. Rabbi, thank you.
Thank you very much. I wish we could do 2 hours.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. That was great.
Amazing.
Take care, guys. Take care.
Shabbat
Bye-bye.
shalom.
You too.
Thank you.